showing high-level allopathic doctors that homeopathy is a real thing. And we'll get to that in a minute. And so basically he says to me, he says, "Joe, I didn't believe you." He said, "But you're better than 90% of my patients that use anti-inflammatories. You've discovered something remarkable."
Welcome to the Radical Health Rebel podcast. I'm your host, Lee Brandon. This work started for me several decades ago when I started to see the impact I could make on people, helping them to identify the root cause of their health problems that no doctor could figure out, including serious back, knee, shoulder and neck injuries, acne and eczema issues, severe gut health problems, even helping couples get pregnant after several IVF treatments had failed. And it really moves me to be able to help people in this way. And that is why I do what I do and why we have this show. In this week's episode of the Radical Health Rebel podcast, I sit down with Dr. Joe Polich, a leading expert on Arnica and other homeopathic remedies for injury, especially sprains and strains. Dr. Joe combines scientifically validated methods with traditional knowledge, offering effective solutions for both athletes and non-athletes alike. We explore how these remedies can be a powerful addition to your healing toolkit, helping you to recover faster from muscle and ligament injuries. Whether you're an athlete looking for quick recovery solutions or just someone wanting to heal better, this episode is packed with practical insights. Dr. Joe Polich, welcome to the Radical Health Rebel podcast. Thanks for coming on the show.
Doctors. Thank you very much. Homeopathy is a real thing, and we'll get to that in a minute.
And Joe, to kick things off,
so basically he says to me, he says, "Joe, I didn't believe you."
And professional
he
background.
Said, "But you're better than 90% of my patients that use anti-inflammatories." Oh, I have a very unusual background for someone that became a homeopath. So I started my life as an engineer. I have 3 engineering degrees, 1 in mechanical and 2 in material science and engineering, which is a small subset. And I was very happy being an engineer. I loved problem solving. I worked a lot in the manufacturing world. I actually was appointed, there's I know you're in Europe, so there's a French company called Alcatel, and I was appointed to 2 working boards, 1 in fiber optics and 1 in space satellites. And so I think the natural progression after that sort of career is to quit your job and become a homeopath, which is kind of what I did. And in the U.S., basically, you have to get some form of a medical license. So I chose chiropractic, went back to school, went to 4 more years of school. Why, I don't know. And then it did a postdoc in homeopathy. And this all really started with, so I'm, an engineer. I'm very happy with my job, but I have a 1-year-old who for the next year, she had diarrhea 2 to 3 times a day. And anyone that's had a little one in diapers, that's hard. If you did not change the diaper within like 30 minutes, her butt was raw. So a lot of work. Took her to every doctor, looked everywhere to try and figure out what's going on. Through the pediatrician, did this, did that, every specialist in the world. They can't figure it out. So long story short, there's a place in the United States called Whole Foods. I went in and I found a vial. The vials typically look like something like this. I'm just looking at them. I have no idea what they are. But I kind of trusted it. Whole Foods is a natural food store. And basically, do they have them in England?
Yes.
Okay. Never mind.
Yes, there are.
Okay.
There are.
So you guys know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So what happens is I take this vial. I now have a 2-year-old. I give her these little white pills. There's little white pills in the bottom here. They taste like sugar. She has no idea. And for the first time in over a year, her stools are solid. I was shocked. I've got 3 engineering degrees. I've done tons of experiments. And I'm like, 1, I don't think any child could make their stool solid. And secondly, she thought it was like candy. So this is not the placebo effect. So I became interested in it. I played mommy homeopath. I learned to be mommy homeopath. And in the end, what happened for me was so at this point, the director of engineering, one of my employees comes in. He just had some trauma in his family. And I realized that I care more about making him feel better than I did about whether he got his code done. So I go back to school. I quit my job. I realized, okay, I'm going to align my life with what I care about. I quit my job. I go become a homeopath. And then in the process, I accidentally invented something that ridiculously reduces swelling and pain and bruising. I had a patient who had a trigger point on her back. She was elderly and she was very thin and very frail, and you literally could see a lump on her back. Her trigger point was so big. And the reason that we were treating her was because she had headaches. And we tried to do the normal chiropractic things and it wasn't doing anything. And then I went to my clinician, I said, can I give her oral Arnica, which is the same thing my daughter had taken? And she's like, we're chiropractors. We don't do things orally. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm assuming, well, this is actually a French company too, Boira. So we had these creams that they're really, really, really low potency. I wanted something way stronger. So what I did was I basically figured out a topical concoction to work, and the trigger point went down like half. Didn't help her headaches at all, but the trigger point went down in half. And then what happened for me was, so I used it on patients for ages. I used this topical anytime somebody had a problem, they had access to it. And I ruptured my ACL. So here I'm like, oh, I actually tried to make like a cream out of it and it didn't work. And I'm like, okay, this is weird. I don't know why there isn't something like this in the United States. So I looked in Europe, I looked in India, I looked all over and could not find. I was looking for this in this potency. So I don't find it. I basically rupture my ACL, which is the anterior cruciate ligament. And I don't swell. This is 2 days after I ruptured my ACL. It's supposed to be really swollen, but I don't know that. I think that, maybe 20% of the population doesn't swell. And I go see an orthopedic surgeon and he tells me there's a very famous school here called Northwestern, and it's top 10 probably medical schools in the country. And he's the orthopedic surgeon for it. And what happens is he tells me, I've been head of orthopedics for 30 years. I've never seen an ACL that doesn't swell, and just thinks I'm crazy because you remember, he's allopathic traditional medicine, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm a homeopath and he just thinks I'm crazy, right? But but he repairs. I'm like, I don't care. Just get my knee repaired. Cause of course I don't expect him to believe me, right? We live in that world. We know this, right?
Yeah.
And so what happens is I go and I basically get my ACL repaired and I don't use anti-inflammatories. And he basically stops me at a month and he said, first of all, we're talking and he's apparently very worried that I'm not taking anti-inflammatories because apparently at about a month, your knee is typically completely swollen at maximum amount and you can't bend it. And so he's worried this is where I'm going to look. But instead at a month, I could almost bend it completely. I very limited amount that I couldn't bend. I was walking around like a normal person. And he was amazed. And he said, Joe, I didn't believe you. So here, and this is important because I know a lot of your listeners are basically into alternative medicine. If you provide the right data, they will follow it. And in fact, my entire journey in the last 14 years has been all about showing high level allopathic doctors that homeopathy is a real thing. And we'll get to that in a minute. And so basically he says to me, Joe, I didn't believe you. He said, but you're better than 90% of my patients that use anti-inflammatories. You've discovered something remarkable. And that was what got me to write the first patent, because it was the fact that he didn't believe it. And I'd done enough research. You don't call something on one unless it's so incredibly unbelievable that you don't that you know that it must be. And I'll show you some photos just because it's up and I don't want to, and then I'll jump back to what my path has been in the last little bit. Okay, so show my ACL first. This is the ACL.
Yeah.
Do you see how there's like no? This is 2 days. Actually, it's actually the day after the injury. I don't know. Have you ever known anybody blew an ACL?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's normally swollen like crazy.
Yeah, so
this
it looks
is
like
a baby.
what I'm
Can you?
seeing.
What do you?
So yeah, I was just going to say, it looks like the right knee is slightly more swollen than the left to me.
Yeah, you can actually tell because there's an imprint of a brace on it. Can you see that?
Right.
A little bit? Yeah. This knee is slightly more swollen, but the point is slightly is the operative word here.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of struggled to see the difference, to be honest, but there's a slight difference. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. If you know what you're looking for, I can tell because I look at those things, but yeah. So there's a baby bump. There's a bump on a baby's head. So what happens is so he says to me, don't go into orthopedics because they're very conservative and they will not use it. And so what I found out is in the United States that 97% of plastic surgeons and dermatologists use homeopathy. And so what I did was I launched a product into dermatology and homeopathy. And I don't know if all your listeners know this, but in Europe, homeopathy is relatively accepted. In the US, not at all. Not at all. It's so much worse. And so what happens is I succeeded in getting the top dermatologists and plastic surgeons in the country to say, yes, this works. We brought a product out. It was called Occumend. And I had 4 past presidents of the American Society of Dermatological Surgeons who all publicly stated that a product, which was a 50M for those that homeopathy, but for the rest of you, I will say just something that's very, 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 very dilute. They absolutely were advocating because they saw the proof was in with their own patients. And in the end, there's a very big company in the United States. I'm sure most of your people are probably familiar with Botox. Lee, do you know what Botox is? I'm assuming it's popular in Europe.
Yeah.
The makers of Botox.
Toxin.
What's that?
It's botulism toxin.
Yep. Yeah. So can you imagine, think about all the barriers that we all have to alternative medicine. I got a legitimate pharmaceutical company who did lots of diligence to make sure this stuff actually worked, to say, yes, this works, and we will license it from you because we think this is an important thing to have in the world. It was pretty amazing. And so that's really, so we have a patch. You can see me, and I was showing you some photos because we actually have some pretty amazing photos. And the real reason that Allergan did that is because the data, we had 2 studies. One study we did basically was a placebo-controlled trial, randomized placebo-controlled trial, where we induced bruising, and the bruising of the patch actually reduced bruising by about 88%. And then we have another published study in the Journal of Ophthalmic Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery that basically showed, I believe it was 52% of patients recovered 5 to 7 days faster. And it was the strength of these studies that mattered. And one of the things that I've always really, really wanted to do was, part of the reason, so I now have a product. So Allergan licensed the old product, and then we launched this one, which unfortunately is not available anywhere but the United States. But if somebody wants to go figure that out and somewhere else, they can. But we launched this, and my real hope at some point is that this becomes big enough that I can do the research that will prove that homeopathy works, and it'll be far more accepted. That's really my desire, because I can do it. I was going to show you lovely pictures to show you, but I can do that with this product. We can say I can pass any double-blind placebo-controlled trial I want to. It's because it's so darn effective. Like, for instance, so one of the photos I was going to show you is we had a guy, this actually was recently, sprained his ankle, all swollen up. We have actually had 2 cases recently. One never had crutches. The other one was off crutches. One of the universities basically measured. I mean, everybody sprained the ankle, right? By the way, what this is actually, for those that are homeopathic, is it's basically taking this, a really high potency Arnica, and putting in this, which doesn't exist in the world. And it was really my manufacturing background that got me there. And so we can reduce swelling, pain, and inflammation of any ligament and tendon out there. We have, case studies where there's an athletic trainer at Texas A&M who basically measures the ankle the night of and does a measurement the next day, and it's less swollen the next day than it was the day he did it. And he played that Saturday. You heard it on Thursday and played on Saturday. So I can pass any double-blind placebo-controlled trial we ever wanted. And that's kind of my underlying. I want this to become big so that we can do the clinical trials.
Yeah, gotcha. What I think would be good right now, actually, before we get into it a little bit more, is if for some people that maybe don't know the detail, if you could explain what homeopathy is, and also why do so many people believe that it's, mumbo jumbo pseudoscience, and also what would be your response to anyone holding that view? Catherine had always been fit and active when she suffered a debilitating back injury. She was barely able to get out of bed or walk without being in excruciating pain. She visited her GP, who prescribed anti-inflammatories, painkillers, and muscle relaxants, and also referred her to an orthopedic consultant. Catherine was bedridden for 10 days and subsequently could only get through the day with large doses of the prescribed pills. Catherine was diagnosed with a prolapsed disc at L3-4, and she was offered anaesthetic injections or spinal surgery. She was horrified and concerned that she would have constant back problems for the rest of her life. Catherine was miserable, could hardly drive, a day at work was agony, and any movements in bed were very painful. I carried out detailed postural assessments, muscle strength tests, and analysis of her movement patterns. I identified the biomechanical problems and prescribed a very specific exercise program to correct her posture, reduce her level of pain, and to prevent the injury reoccurring. After 5 weeks on the program, the pain had reduced hugely in her back, and Catherine stopped taking painkillers. After 10 weeks, Catherine was back jogging and doing more intensive exercise with absolutely no back pain, and she was so pleased that she was able to pick up her young son again. If you're suffering like Catherine was, and you'd like to find out more about getting to the root cause of your back pain, go to www.bodycheck.co.uk and request a consultation. Now, back to the podcast.
Lily, I love that you asked that question because it's a great question. Okay. So, everyone's familiar with herbal, and actually many people probably have used herbal Arnica as well. There's both homeopathic and herbal. And the key is that homeopathic products are diluted. The reason they're controversial is because they're diluted past, there's something called Avogadro's number for those of us that are scientists. And we are diluted. Basically, what Avogadro's number says is below a certain level of dilution, there is no original substance in there. This product, so Avogadro's number is 10 to the minus 32. I'm probably going way too math on the, I'll explain this non-math in a moment. I'll go math for those that are into math, and then I'll go non-math.
I'm with you. I'm fine.
This is 10 to the minus 2,000.
Wow.
Okay. The product Allergan bought was 10 to the minus 100,000. So to make it simple, basically to make it simple, we are so far dilute beyond what any chemist would think there was something in there. They're like, there's nothing in there. Can't work, right? So there's been research that was done, and the research suggests that when you make a homeopathic remedy, you actually form a structure, which we call HASA nanostructures. And what these are is that it's a combination of the original substance and water. And in fact, the reason we patented this as well. And the reason why you could not take this and put it together is because these structures are formed and they are the active ingredient within homeopathy. So what I tell people, so first of all, realize, I'll give you a story. There's a very famous dermatologist. His name is Dr. Roy Geronimus, and he's in New York City. He's a past president of the American Society of Dermatological Surgeons. He has been forever the president of the New York City one. Okay. And his position was homeopathy does not work. I've tried it a million times. It doesn't work. And he's very famous, and I really wanted him to try this because I knew it would work. It took me 2 years. And what he did was I said, okay, use it only on patients that 100% of the time bruise, and then call me. So I talked to him 3 months later. He's like, I stopped calling people. I'm like, oh no, it didn't work. And he's like, no, my staff called 41 patients that had always bruised, and none of them bruised. So you can, with good data, get to these skeptics. But he absolutely didn't believe it because of the dilution factor. Does that make sense, Lee?
Mm-hmm.
And so basically, there's obviously something there. The data suggests that it's HASA, what we call HASA nanostructures. And what they are is they've imaged them with atomic force microscopes. And it's not, so this is the problem, is that people think, oh, it's the original ingredient. No, there's actually another structure that's formed. And so I am able to, your point of what do I say to skeptics? I can't speak. What do I say to skeptics? I simply say, try it. And when I got Dr. Geronimus to use it, he has become one of the things that's lovely about brilliant skeptics is if you convince them, they become the biggest supporters you possibly have. Dr. Geronimus, if I called him today, I probably haven't talked to him for a while. And if I called him today, he's like, what do you need? He's just that person. In fact, we still have a patent that's pending in England, in Europe, actually. And he got up super early, he's on East Coast time, but he got up at 7:00 in the morning to give a presentation to the European Patent Office because of the fact he's gone from complete skeptic to absolute believer because of this product.
Yeah. So in terms of how homeopathy works, how would you describe that to someone who doesn't know how it works?
So and by the way, one of the things I very much try to do is be very clear on what I know and what I don't know. Okay. And so what I will say is this is just based on being a very analytical person, 3 engineering degrees, go figure, and observing it over the last 20 years. And the best way I would describe it, so let's say that I hit my arm on the door jamb, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would get a little bruise. This makes your body believe you just got hit by a baseball bat. So it just amplifies what your body normally does and brings more of the cytokines and other things that you normally do. Let's say you would send 50 cytokines, which are things that are used to clean up bruising. And this would send 2,000 of them. So it just happens way faster. One of the things that's really key about homeopathy, unlike, pharmaceutical and some botanicals and supplements, homeopathy cannot work if your body can't heal it. So for instance, type 1 diabetes, homeopathy won't touch it. Type 1 diabetes, you need insulin. Your body cannot make insulin. Therefore, we can't touch it. You give a homeopathic remedy to somebody with type 1 diabetes and nothing happens. Because your body can't make the insulin. We can't help you. Yeah. Type 2 is different. Your body often is still able to make insulin, and so we can help type 2. But once your body's no longer capable of making it, we can't help it.
Mm. Yeah, in terms of the mechanism in how it works. Now, obviously, one thing we do know is that water stores memory, right? Water is one of the best storers of memory, which is why a lot of supercomputers, hard drives, are now made of water. So even though that the physical molecule, or whatever you want to call it, is no longer in the water, my understanding is, but the memory of that substance is still in the water. Am I on the right lines?
So I don't call it, that's the nanostructures we're talking about.
Right. Okay.
So the nanostructures, which have been imaged with atomic force microscopes, and if I could show my screen, I could actually show you the pictures of them, because they're very, very cool. And if you want, Lee, I can send them. I'll send you the research, and you can see the photos, because it's pretty cool. Yeah. This is what they're talking about the memory of water. There's a number of things. There's been some work that's been done in Washington University here in Washington State, and it turns out that water will form a long structure much longer than they ever thought. And so this is part and parcel of what happens with homeopathy is, yes, it's stored in those structures that are made with the water that are ordered. And that's basically when I have to be honest, I haven't read the memory of water stuff in 20 years. And so I'm not 100% sure what they mean, but yes, if water is a very unique substance. If it did not, it's basically, and in fact, we're going to go deep a little bit. So the reason that you can't make this and this actually has to do with the hydrogen bonds that are in water. You need hydrogen bonds free, and this is my entire patent actually. In order to make a homeopathic remedy, the hydrogen bonds must be free. When they're in a gel, picture your hydrogen bond is here. The gel grabs onto the hydrogen bond. And so you can't make the Hassa nanostructure. So the patent was simple. You needed to have the water molecule completely free, able to form the Hassa nanostructures. And then when you cross-link it, which is what happens with gels, then it can hold on to it, but the nanostructure has to be made first. And that's the entire point. And that's why no one over 200 years has ever been able to make this gel with a homeopathic remedy.
And is there a particular type of water that's generally used?
Doesn't matter. Basically, we literally just natural water. We've been making these for 200 years. You want water that's as natural as possible, because it's always worked.
Yeah. So I'm guessing you don't use chlorinated, fluoridated water.
I do all the time.
Really? Wow.
They work fine.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. The other thing that I was going to ask you, and you've kind of answered it, but you might want to go into more detail. So obviously, when you have an injury, a normal reaction is to get inflammation, redness, pain. It's there for a reason. Now, when you were saying, you tore your ACL, there was no inflammation. From what you said earlier, I'm gathering what you were suggesting is that the kind of immune response just happens quicker. Is that your understanding?
Yep. So this is a question I thought you were going for, and I'm going to answer it because it's one that I pondered. And that is, so for instance, I hate steroids. Steroids are not positive for the body. They shut the body down.
Yeah.
And so, for instance, one of the things that was super surprising to us was that when we did the bruising study, that we prevented the bruising. We don't know why. But my guess is that the bruising, the reason we discolor, by the way, humans are the only ones that discolor. No other animals discolor with a normal bruise. The only reason they discolor is if you open a blood vessel. Totally happens. But if you just hit them lightly or something would normally cause a bruise in a human, they don't do this. So there must be a reason why we bruise. It has to be done in order to help the healing, right? But we seem to get things to heal so fast that you don't need it.
Mhm.
And the same thing for the ankle. I call it the run away from the lion. And so it's one of the few cases where we will sacrifice a limb. Like if you have to, it will sacrifice to the point where it'll lock up if you need to.
Mhm.
Because if you think about it, if you sprain your ankle, it swells like crazy. You sprain your wrist, it you sprain your wrist, it swells a little bit, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's because you need the swelling stabilizes the joint so you can run away. It's going to hurt like crazy, but you're going to run away. And so the thing that I trust about homeopathy, and this is having seen it for 25 years now, is that one, homeopathy can only do what the body can normally do. All we do is amplify what the body normally does. And two, I trust the body. I trust that it knows what to do in what sort of situation. And so with the swelling, what I think, and again, I don't really know, that we do is we just amplify it so much faster that the body's like, okay, you're going to run away from the line and we don't really need you to swell so much. And it's really just an acceleration of what your body normally does. And the same thing with the bruising, it just decides, okay, we're moving fast enough. We don't really need to worry about this. And there's actually people that have this. I was actually with a friend of mine last night, and I've talked to people, some athletic trainers about this. There are people that are super healers that just heal up way faster than the rest of us mortals. And so they don't swell very much.
Interesting. Yeah, it's interesting because I know when we spoke previously, I mentioned Trawmill, which is a homeopathic. It comes in different forms, but it can be an injection, it can be a pill, it can be an ointment. And I remember some years ago looking into studies they did in Germany where they had athletes, I think it was ankle sprains, if I remember right. And one group, they used corticosteroids, and another group, they used Trawmill, I believe it was injections. And the Trawmill group had much less inflammation and they recovered, I think it was twice as fast as those that were using the steroids. So it sounds similar, but it sounds like your product is doing the same thing, but quicker.
And way more potent. So Trawmill, if I remember, I don't use it much anymore. I used to have it. Ours is probably at least 300 times as potent as Trawmill.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So my next question is, well, it involves, I was going to say athletes, but non-athletes as well might suffer from ligament sprains and muscle strains. What are the key homeopathic remedies for these type of injuries that everyone needs to know about? I'm briefly interrupting this episode to remind you can now hear an extra No Punches Pulled episode every month with an amazing and almost certainly controversial guest who's not scared to put their head above the parapet. These guests are exposing lies and corruption, sharing their stories of being gaslit or cancelled for telling the truth, and offering real-world solutions to achieving optimal health and maintaining freedom amidst increasing censorship and restrictive regulations. These are the types of episodes I started producing back in 2022, for which I was cancelled on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and deplatformed from LinkedIn. These additional episodes are for subscribers only. For the equivalent of one takeaway coffee per month, you can now become a paid subscriber and receive exclusive access to content the authorities do not want you to hear. I really hope you can support the podcast to help it continue, and also to help me bring you even better, more controversial, educational, and inspiring guests. Subscribing to the Radical Health Rebel podcast is a much more productive investment than supporting organizations that feed you lies, propaganda, and predictive programming like TV licensing, cable, satellite, and major film streaming services. Subscribing to the Radical Health Rebel podcast to receive premium content couldn't be simpler. Just go to the show notes, click on support the show, and follow the instructions. In fact, why not do it right now? And once you've subscribed, come straight back and listen to the rest of the episode. For the equivalent of just one takeaway coffee per month, let's rebel against the mainstream narrative and create a healthier, fairer, and freer world together. Thanks for listening and for your support.
Okay. So your first is always going to be Arnica. And I'm sure you guys know Arnica. This isn't very potent, but it's the main ingredient. And pretty much Arnica works on soft tissue, meaning bruises. You run into something. Everybody knows it for bruises. That's your little fat pad here. And it really works really well in muscles. It's not as great on ligament and tendons. What you want for them is you want rust tox and ruta and ledum. And those basically work on ligament, tendons, and muscles all together, but mostly ligament and tendons. And then the other thing is ledum is really good for black eyes. Actually, Arnica doesn't do black eyes. And another thing is ruta is very good for actually the goose egg that I tried to show you. It's actually really good for that. And so, because it does things on what we call the periosteal area, which is right, the covering for your bones. And so that you really want to make sure if you're going, let's say if you decide, especially since you can't get it, and you basically go by the oral version of this and you basically dose it as often as possible. So one of the other things that I learned is that time matters. Putting this on you for a long period of time is hugely important. Part of the reason it's actually about 1,000 times more potent than this, but it's not only that it's more potent, but it's a fact that this is applied for 24 hours straight. And between the two of them, so if you're doing it orally through the mouth with something like this is actually what it says. This is ledum, 1M. You really want to take it as frequently as you can tolerate. And I would just take them all. I would just take them all. I would pop it in the mouth and I would dissolve them and I would just do it as often as possible.
When you say tolerate, what would be the sort of signs that you're not tolerating it?
In this case, it's just annoying. Sorry, I was like, what am I thinking about there? In this case, it's just that it's annoying to dissolve something in your mouth that often. Right. Like you don't want to do it. It's not a toleration. Yeah. Homeopathy, I'm sure that everyone knows this. Well, and it's very well tolerated. Like we've had this product out for I don't know how long, and we are required in the United States to record every time somebody has problems with it. And we have problems. We sell it with a tape. This is kinesio tape. We sell it the tape. We have people that react to this because it's got adhesive in it. And of course, I'm sure some of your people some of the people that listen have reactions to adhesives. We get effects of the gel. So far, I've never seen anything I can ascribe to any of the homeopathics that are in it. And we've sold it to thousands and thousands and thousands of people.
Yeah. So we've mentioned Arnica. Can you discuss the specific benefits of it and why it's so effective for injuries?
Well, I have to be honest. It's really just, we know Arnica is good for bruising and muscles. Like you have muscle strain, you go run a marathon or, it's really, really good to just take a lot of Arnica after the marathon. And one of the important things is as soon as possible. So that's really pretty much what I can tell you is the main thing is Arnica. If you ever bruise yourself, put it on. Absolutely put it on. It's very, very, very good for that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. A family member of mine had a fall a couple of weeks ago, broke their arm in 3 places.
Oof.
And so they've got a plaster cast on, but above the plaster cast, it was bright purple. The whole arm was just literally bright purple. And it's quite amusing to me because another family member that's got absolutely no clue about any of this stuff was on holiday in Spain, and they bought something called a muscle rub. They bought it for themselves because they had a sore knee, right? And this person said to me, would this be any good for the arm? And I said, well, let me have a look at the ingredients. And I just looked at the packaging and I said, oh, it might have arnica in it, right? So I started looking through the ingredients and it's got arnica in it.
Mm-hmm.
And the interesting thing was, as soon as we put it on this person's arm, literally the next day, the bruising started to come out.
Mm-hmm.
So it's quite interesting that we're talking about arnica, and I've had, quite a deep experience with arnica in the last couple of weeks, and the person's healing really well as well, actually, even though they're quite elderly. Now, would you say that homeopathy can be used to prevent sports injuries and not just treat them? And if so, how does it do that?
So does it prevent? So it conceptually can prevent, in other words, but I don't know that you want to, would be the way that I would describe it. So first, do no harm, which is a very important thing, is, and so you could okay, so homeopathy in general is very good for prevention. And I'm thinking more of the chronic cases that I know.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is that you would have to wear, let's say you wanted to use arnica because you might sprain your ankle. It's not going to do anything. Although one of the cases that Ashley would probably consider doing is, let's say you're going to be a weekend warrior, where you are basically knowing that you're going to be running around and you're going to get muscle soreness. In that case, I would take some arnica, but I'm assuming orally or the patch. If you're in the United States, I throw the patch. Let's say on your major muscles, I throw it on I'd throw a patch on, and it'll probably reduce it substantially. We did do, actually, in the bruising test that we published, we found that if we actually do a pre-application of arnica, because of course we knew we were going to bruise in that case, the pre-application of arnica beforehand, we put the arnica on, we removed the patch, obviously, did the bruise, and then put it on again. It actually worked better than if all we did was put it on for the same amount afterwards. So you can definitely do that. Sprains, it's going to be hard to do, but in muscle soreness, absolutely you can do that.
Yeah, so I was, as you were speaking, and I was thinking, I lift weights, I play tennis quite a lot, and some weeks can be quite full on. But then I started thinking, well, what about people that do things like Brazilian jiu-jitsu and boxing and sports like that, where not only is it physically demanding, but you do get bruised as well?
When boxing, especially, you're going to get punched. Yeah, you could probably do that. I didn't think about that, but that's a great idea.
Yeah, I'll take 5% for your sales on boxers.
Yeah, I often see that, and we have a lovely picture of my son who actually flipped on a trampoline. So I learned this recently. He said, I was trying to do a double flip on a trampoline, but the second double landed with him on the bar of the trampoline. So it's all on his eye, 100% of his eye. So he comes into the house. He's got a goose egg here. He's got, just smashed all here. And he basically hit so hard that he split his lid of his eye. And so I put my magical little, formulation on him, take a picture of him, because I'm a mean mom, just saying. And then I take him to the emergency room. So he goes in and gets 4 stitches, right? He should have been swollen shut, because if you hit something hard enough to split your face open, he should have been swollen shut. No swelling, no black eye. I have pictures of that, but I can't show them to you. I mean, if you want, I'll send them to you. I don't know if you.
Yeah.
I'll send them to you, because it's one of those things where you're just, it was one of the things that helped me realize how incredibly effective this is. But yeah, so you can, with boxers, I think all the time, oh my God, you guys should so be using this stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yes. So you've spoken about your ACL injury. You've just mentioned your son's eye injury. What was the story you were going to tell earlier about the child with the bump on their head?
So this actually had happened. This had happened a number of years ago. One of my patients had told me that her little one was on a playground and got hit in the head. And she's like, yeah, I put the patch on the head and I literally watched it. I watched it go down. And so I never experienced that until a customer, I got probably about 2 months ago, basically did a video of this where literally you see a goose egg. What happened was, we have these things. I don't know if they have them in England, but they go in the door jamb and it's a little bouncy thing, right? Do they have
Jolly
those? What are they called?
Jolly jumper.
Okay. A jolly jumper. See, I can now speak English. It'll be good.
Well, no, I think it's an American term, but
no, we don't use it. We don't use that term.
Oh, I know. I only know that from American people.
Oh,
but, yeah.
Okay. Well, it's a jumper that sits in the door jamb, and this little baby, probably 6 to 8 months old, and the lovely older 2-year-old takes and swings the little one into the door jamb. And so she ends up hitting her head. It swells up like it always happens with little ones. And she puts the patch on, and and an hour and a half later, she's pulling it off. It's gone. The bump's completely gone.
Wow.
And it's those things. What I realized is that what active men can do, and actually actually going back to the original story, when I ruptured my ACL. So I'm very involved in the American homeopathic world. Like, I was the president of the the Illinois Homeopathic Medical Association. My 2 colleagues, one unfortunately passed just a couple of weeks ago, were 2 of the top homeopaths in the country, and they trained me. And I showed them the results, and they're like, we've never seen it work this well. This is beyond what we could. And that's when I realized that what I had done with the patch was so much better than we'd ever seen. And so all of these stories, it's like you see that it helps in other cases. And actually, even going back to, I had been using oral doses on patients for years and years and years. And the reason I looked all over the world was because a patch version works so much better. And so I think that really understanding that becomes very, very important when, like with the goose egg, it's like, yes, if you'd given the baby oral, remedies, which you can easily do, you just crush it up in their mouth, they would have reacted, but they're not going to react in an hour and a half. It's the speed and the degree to which and the consistency. Like we did with the clinical study that was a double-blind placebo-controlled trial, the results were so overwhelming because it wasn't like 1 or 2. It was like, the photos are unbelievable. They're actually on the website, where you see virtually no bruising in one case and really dark black kind of bruises in the other. And the question, you can't look at these 2 groups and not know that they're not substantially different.
Yeah. So is that the only study you've done was into bruising, or have you looked at other kind of tissues?
We did a surgery one, and it was basically eye surgery and nose surgery, both of which would tend to cause black eyes, because the original product that Allergan had was only for facial bruising and for black eyes. So it only had Arnica and Ligament in it. And so it basically was used. They did what's called blepharoplasty, which is eye surgery, and they did rhinoplasty, which is nose surgery, and that's where they showed an 88%. I'm sorry, I'm mixing my studies up. That's where they showed that 52% of the patients recovered 5 to 7 days faster. And that was published and the people that were on the publication, one was the past president of the of one of the major plastic surgery. The key is, when we worked with these are people that are naturally very, very, very skeptical and very well respected within the field. And it's the consistency of the results that they see where they are absolutely convinced something that is more dilute than seems possible, but it works because the data is so overwhelming.
Yeah. So how do you determine which homeopathic remedy is appropriate for a particular type of injury? Ian, a semi-professional footballer, was plagued by a recurring groin injury for over 3 years. Despite seeing 5 physiotherapists, 3 sports physicians, and undergoing surgery, Ian's injury persisted. After spending thousands on medical insurance, the treatments offered were all the same, generic and ineffective. Ian's hopes of getting back on the pitch seemed out of reach until he decided to give it one last shot. Ian came to me for help. Through detailed assessments and analysis, I created a personalized corrective exercise program addressing his imbalances and weaknesses. But that was just the beginning. We're also focused on nutrition, hydration, breathing, and sleep, which are key factors for optimizing recovery. The results? Well, Ian is back playing football for the first time in 3 years, stronger and fitter than ever. He's full of energy, is more alert, and has a renewed positive outlook on life. So if you're struggling with a prolonged injury that just won't go away, like Ian's was, and you want to get to the root cause once and for all, visit www.bodycheck.co.uk. That's bodychek.co.uk, and request a consultation today. It's time to get back to the sport you love, stronger, healthier, and pain-free.
So I don't. I'll really so I don't. I basically goes against, there's something called classical homeopathy, but in this case, because it's an acute injury, I don't think it really matters. And I just always, from the beginning, I don't know whether you need Ligament. I don't know whether you need Arnica. I know you need at least Arnica. Almost every case you're going to need Arnica. You might need, like for an ACL, you need Arnica and Rust Tox. I know that because I experienced that situation. And so I just put them all together. This has 6 ingredients, and it's funny because, of course, because I'm in this world of research, going back into the old homeopathic journals, going back through 200 years worth of data. And nobody really figured out like exactly what each one of these, like whether it's an ankle injury ligament or whether it's a knee ligament. And so in this case, the downside of combining and taking a remedy you don't really need is really, really small. And it's better than not having the remedy that you do need. So if you do it, what I would do, for those of you that are in Europe, I would just simply, this is a Ruta, this is Ledum. I would take all of these. I would probably put them literally, I actually carry packets when I don't feel like having this around. I actually keep this with me all the time. And then there's a couple different ways you could dose it. You could literally dissolve them under your tongue. But as I mentioned, you want to take it really, really frequently. So what you can do is just I often will just put it in a water bottle and then you just sip it. And so just put them all in, and I'll repeat this. I'm sure this will show up on your website somewhere. You want Arnica, you want Ledum.
Can you spell that?
LED. So hold on. I actually have Ledum here. Can you read it? LED.
Yeah.
Read it?
Yeah.
I don't have them all. This is Ruta. I have a couple of them here. This is one of the Rutas. I will.
So that's RUTA.
RUTA. There's Rust Tox. It's RHUS. And we abbreviate it TOX, and do not ask me how to spell that. I couldn't do it for my life depending on it. So let's say Ruta, Rust Tox, Ledum, Arnica, and what am I missing? No, I think those are the main four. Yeah.
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 Yeah. So if it was a ligament sprain, muscle strain.
I'd combine the four. Yep.
Yeah. Gotcha.
So one of the things that I will tell you, we also have that is that, what does it not work on? So it doesn't work on arthritis. There's nothing that I know works on arthritis, but so the thing about homeopathy that's different, like you take a painkiller, it'll get rid of pain because it blocks the nerves. But again, we're working with the body to help you heal faster. And we're not just blocking the pain. And so essentially when you take a painkiller, it blocks the pain, the source of the pain is still there. Your brain the connection between your nerves, connection all the way up, it's just no longer there. It's just not sensing the pain that's there. And so you can do that with arthritis, but you're not going to get rid of the underlying pain. And so, because there's nothing that I know, even with medicinal outside of surgery, I don't know anything that will help you with arthritis. Well, I guess that's not true because chondroitin does as well. Chondroitin does. But severe arthritis, when you really got it bad, I don't know anything that will really help it. And so we can't, again, we see even chondroitin's different than homeopathy. We can't help anything the body can't heal itself on. You cannot heal. You cannot heal arthritis.
Again, I'm not going to go into the whole story because my audience have heard this a million times. But I had osteoarthritis in my left knee, and I healed it by stop eating oats.
Really?
Yeah.
When you say so, I'm assuming you did not have a severe version of it.
I could only bend my knee to 90 degrees instead of the full 135 degrees.
Okay. So we could talk a lot about that. What I would say to you is you didn't heal the arthritis, you healed the reaction to the arthritis. Your inflammatory process decreased, but you can't heal the arthritis.
What I did do is I stopped the root cause of the problem. It was a reaction to the food, right, that was causing the inflammation.
Yes.
So in my experience, a lot of arthritic conditions actually coming from the gut. So if you heal the gut, the arthritis tends to go away.
And so being a practitioner, I would say that your inflammatory process is absolutely connected to the gut. So you have your arthritis, right? Which is basically where you have thinning of the cartilage, right? But the question is, does that thinning of then after that thinning is it annoying or is it not annoying? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's like lots of people can have this thinning of the cartilage. In fact, okay, I'll use a herniated disc as an example. There's a study done many years ago.
I've had two of those as well.
There's a study done many years ago that showed that 30% of people, and by the way, this is a long time ago since I've looked at this study, so I could be wrong on the numbers. 30% of people walk around with herniated discs are completely asymptomatic. Okay?
Yeah, it's actually a lot more than that.
Okay.
It's about
what is
76%.
Okay, so you're probably more up on this than I. 76% of people walk around with a herniated disc and they're asymptomatic.
Yeah.
And there's some number of them that get symptomatic. So what you did is similar to him. You became your arthritis is still there, but you're now asymptomatic arthritis, which is more normal because you're not going to be able to, just like you're not going to heal a herniated disc just by getting the inflammatory process down. You're not going to heal the underlying problem because the herniated disc is there. But you're healing the fact that it causes an inflammatory process because actually the pain around a herniated disc is basically you get an acidic situation around it. And so you can't heal the herniated disc, but you heal the fact that you are no longer inflammatory around it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I've got you.
So you become asymptomatic.
Yeah.
Which is very cool. And that does not surprise me. I find the gut so and what I do love is that it's becoming more and more and more of a thing where people are really, really understanding it and working on that piece. It's not something I know a lot about, but I am impressed by it.
Yeah. It's interesting when you talk about discs, because I herniated my L4-5 and had quite a bad bulge on my L5-S1 about 11 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, yes, you're right in what you're saying. My L4-5, it was a complete herniation, so it's never going to go back to how it was, but I'm completely pain-free.
And that's the key, is that the disc is there, but the idea is if you keep the body working in its best, you're asymptomatic.
Yeah.
So and that's why I would describe your arthritis, is that you can be symptomatic or asymptomatic, but the arthritis is still there, but you're asymptomatic around it because you've got your whole body working better with stopping the oats.
Yeah. Well, this has been a very interesting conversation, but what's next for you, Dr. Joe?
When you say what's next, I just keep working on, my objective in life is, if I ever get there, is to convince the world that homeopathy actually is a real thing. It works. And get it more accepted, because I personally think it is the most incredibly effective product or effective medicine out there, and it can just help people. And the fact that it's so much more natural, it matters to me.
Yeah. And what about getting your product into Europe? Are you working on that at the moment?
So the regulations in Europe are different than the US. Honestly, it would be so overwhelming. Like if we ever do it, it'll be somebody else to do it, because the idea of dealing with the regulations, I know the US ones, I've done it. If we do really well in the US, we'll probably, the main thing is I need to get this so that we make enough money in the US so I can go invest in somebody to bring it into other countries.
So you might license it to other territories, maybe.
Yeah, it's actually made in Europe. It's actually our manufacturers in Europe.
Yeah,
and
you
so
can't sell it here.
No, I can't sell it there because I don't know what the regulatory and then the other problem is, it's like starting a company, so much work and so many things you don't understand. And it's not even just getting through the regulatory process, which I'm guessing isn't too terrible. It's actually I have no idea. Like, I understand the US situation, I know, but you really need somebody that understands, because this is so, if I was making just another painkiller, another, I don't know, icy hot or something like that, lidocaine patch, people know what they are. When you tell people that you're going to reduce their swelling by like 50% in 24 hours, they think you're crazy. And so it's one of those things where we would have to have a tremendous amount of money, because it's going to cost us millions of dollars to go figure out how to hit the European market. And that's really what it is.
Yeah, or it might be a case of just having the right contacts in Europe who's quite switched on to all that stuff.
Yes, and I don't happen to have that.
Yeah.
So you're completely right.
Great stuff. And where can people find you online?
So you can basically, you guys can all see ActiveMend. It's www.activemend. There's no E in the word active. .com. You find them there. Also, I love to tell people, I love hearing from people. So if you do buy ActiveMend, you get an email that is automatically sent. But if you respond to that email, I will personally answer it. And so you can always reach me at dr.jo@activemend.com. And I love hearing stories from people. It's what makes me super happy.
Awesome. Dr. Joe, thank you so much. I always love talking about pain and healing and things like that. So it's definitely been enjoyable for me, and I'm sure the audience got a lot out of this episode as well.
And thank you so much for having me on. It's been an absolute delight. I'm honored that I got to be on your podcast, and I'm looking forward to talking further if you have any question about homeopathy, I'm super happy to answer.
Awesome. So that's all from Dr. Joe and me for this week. But don't forget to join me same time, same place next week on the Radical Health Rebel podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Remember to give the show a rating and a review, and I'll see you next time.